So, a bit of a story time for you. I've been buying real estate in the US for 10 years. I started in 2016, and at one point we scaled really quickly and we owned 120 rental properties across multiple markets in the US. And we did that between 2016 and 2020. So we scaled super quick. And the way we did that was to buy cheap property, do a light rehab, and then stick a tenant in there. And invariably we were buying kind of these lower end properties that you see knocking around anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000. They're not in the best part of town, but they do rent pretty well. And these things look great on paper. But what we found by 2023, with 120 properties, we were actually losing money every month. We weren't making a penny. We were actually digging into our reserves. And there were two main reasons for that. The first was tenant turnovers, which were huge for us. Cost us about $5,000 on average when a tenant left. A lot of tenants left very often. And the other thing was repairs and CapEx. So there was lots and lots of monthly maintenance, lots of call outs, and lots of CapEx as well. And we learnt some pretty serious lessons. And I'll tell you in a minute exactly how we fixed the problem. But the issue really was that these cheaper properties in the sort of less desirable parts of town, they look good on paper, but our experience is those tenant turnovers are going to kill your business. And combine that with the repairs and CapEx, and you end up putting more money into those properties over a few years. It takes a few years to accumulate, but you end up putting more money into those properties than they're actually worth, and they don't cash flow. So what we found is those kind of properties attract the worst kind of tenants. They don't stay very long. They don't look after the property. There are problems collecting rent. We had tons of evictions, and they were just generally a nightmare. So here's how we fixed it. We reviewed and audited our entire portfolio, and we sold 90 properties. And some of those properties, a good chunk, we sold at a loss. So overall, including everything, we'd put more into some of those properties than we actually sold them for, including the purchase price and CapEx and repairs and all of the turnovers and all that stuff. So we lost money on some of those deals. We made money on some of the others just because the market generally had uplifted prices and we'd added some value to the properties. So we sold 90 properties and we took the money that we made from that, which wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough. And we put that money into our remaining 30 properties, which were all in nicer areas. They were bigger properties, all minimum 1,200 square feet, all 3+ bedrooms, couple of bathrooms, nicer suburbs. And we went about, as tenants left those properties, renovating them. And we put on new roofs. We dug up sewer lines and replaced sewer lines. We replaced furnaces and water heaters. We ripped out walls and put in new electrics. We put in new plumbing. We put in high specification kitchens and bathrooms with granite worktops in the kitchen and tiled floors and good spec. And what we found is that those kind of properties in the slightly better neighborhoods, bigger properties, attracted a different class of tenant. So we kind of eliminated the turnover because those tenants tend to stay long, plus the houses were a lot nicer. So from the tenant's perspective, because we'd taken care of all that CapEx, all of the new roofs and such, there were no leaky roofs, there was no leaky plumbing, there was no faulty electrics. So our general maintenance bill was almost eliminated. It dropped by at least 90%. Our tenant turnover costs, gone. We have not evicted or lost a tenant since 2023 in any of our properties. And overall, our 30 cash properties that we had left at that point, we've got a few more now, cash flow like crazy. We get almost no calls for maintenance. Our tenants are super happy. They're not constantly calling out property managers and contractors for repairs. So based on that, we have kind of 5 rules now that we apply to our own acquisitions, and when we're helping other people, when we're consulting with other investors who are buying rental properties in the US, we have 5 rules. And I'll talk you through those now. And you can apply these, and I really would encourage you to apply these rules to your own investment strategy, because this is what really saved us from the verge of bankruptcy and also turned what was a huge portfolio that was losing money into a tight, small portfolio which cash flows like crazy. And the first rule is Bigger properties, less units. We don't deal in these triplex and quadplex properties or small single family homes. They just attract the wrong kind of tenant. They don't stay very long, and they generally typically harder to manage. So we prefer bigger properties, minimum 1,200 square feet, minimum 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, although I do own 1 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom, and it has a great tenant in there, but the rest of our properties are 3, 4, 5, even 6-bedroom properties. Those attract better quality tenants, and those tenants are families and older couples, and they generally tend to want to stay in the property for much longer term than the much more transient younger single folks or couples, younger couples. So bigger properties, less units, 1,200 square feet, 3+ bathrooms. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is the renovation, right? We made the mistake of doing a light rehab and saying we'll take care of other stuff as it comes up. It was a huge mistake for us. Now, when I buy a property, I actually partner with contractors who do the renovations for me, and I buy the property from the contractor, so they effectively flip me the house. And that means I pay now a lot more for the properties than I did when I was scaling my portfolio, because I'm buying a completed product. I'm buying a house with a new roof and a new furnace and a new water heater and new plumbing and electrics and a good kitchen and bathroom and a full exterior remodel, new windows and doors, everything brand new. And that will eliminate, for at least the next 10 years, any CapEx, and up to 20 years as well. You've got a 25-year roof. You've replaced the 100-year-old sewer line with brand new. You've got a brand new furnace that's going to last you up to 20 years, new water heater, new HVAC. And that is going to really help improve your cash flow, because you're not going to have CapEx to worry about, and also your general maintenance cost, even if it's an older property, because everything's brand new, it's going to be way lower. So that's less hassle, less cost, more cash flow. So focus on those kind of rehabs would be my advice. That would be rule number 2. Don't skimp on the rehab and expect to be able to pull money out of the property when it's rented, because you won't have enough cash flow to do it. The next thing is minimums for values and rents. No longer will you find me in those cheap properties. I'm absolutely not. So for me, minimum value, fully cleaned up and at market rents, it's got to be worth at least $150,000. Anything less than that, and I feel you're edging into the worst neighborhoods, you're edging into the bottom end of the tenant pool. And, you know, if it's a $150,000 house, a roof's still costing you $12,000. Flooring is still costing you $6 to $8 a square foot. Painting it's going to cost between $2 and $5 grand when a tenant leaves, no matter what market it's in. So relative to the property value, you could very quickly end up putting more money into that property than it's actually worth. So for us, it's got to be a minimum of $150,000. Typically, we're buying now at a price point of $175,000 to $250,000. That's our sweet spot for pricing. And also, we have a minimum of rent as well. I won't touch units that rent for less than $1,200 a month. The smallest property we have, which is the 2-bedroom property that I mentioned in Kansas City, has a forever renter in it. They want to stay on the property forever. They pay me $1,350 per month, and that's the lowest rent property we have. Anything less than that, and you're not going to collect enough rent to build cash reserves for maintenance, vacancies, and CapEx. The margins are going to be too thin, so you need to think a little bit bigger. Otherwise, you are going to come unstuck, and you're going to end up having to come out of pocket when one of those expenses does come up. Rule number 4, cheaper cities, better neighborhoods. So look, I buy properties in the Midwest mostly because that's where houses are affordable. Locals can afford to rent and buy. The good job markets, stable economies, growing populations, and properties are available way cheaper than in other more popular markets, the coastal markets, for example. You know, we can pick up a fully renovated 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house for $175,000 with brand new everything, and it's going to rent for $1,750 a month. That is a great deal. But in those markets, in those cheaper cities, those cheaper metros in the Midwest, you will find those really rough neighborhoods. And it is tempting because you could go pick up a house for 50, 60, 70, 100 grand. But we've made that mistake. We know how that turns out. So we're definitely not going to do that. We stay away from the rougher neighborhoods and we stick to the better neighborhoods in cheaper cities. And what I mean by better neighborhood, you walk the street and you can see all of the yards are taken care of. There aren't many vacant properties on the street. There aren't, loose dogs running around everywhere. There's not trash in people's front lawns. And you'll find house flippers on those streets as well. We just helped a client buy a property in Kansas City. The house next door was rehabbed last year. The house on the other side was rehabbed 5 years ago. There's a house being rehabbed directly opposite right now. And where those house flippers are, where those local guys are flipping houses to homeowners, that's where you want to be, because that's where the area is improving and values are going to increase and people are moving into those areas. So your rents are going to increase. It's going to rent quickly. You're going to get better tenants and it's going to appreciate over the long term, which is what we want. So cheaper cities, better neighborhoods. And the last rule I have is property management. Have multiple property managers. We were using big national property managers or regional property managers, big corporate guys with shiny offices, and we found those guys will nickel and dime you to death, and really they do not understand how to deal with these kind of cheaper properties and that type of tenant. If you're in a $200,000 property by US standards, that's half the national average, so it's still considered a cheap property. And they're working class folk that live in these houses, and a lot of these property managers, they're not owner operated businesses. They just have staff. They don't communicate well with your tenants. They outsource all of the repair work. It'll cost you $500 for a simple plumbing repair that should be a couple of $100. So for us, I've built my network to include multiple property managers in every local market that we own property. So I know if we have a property manager and the owner gets sick, or they decide to just shut down the business, or they don't want to manage the property anymore, I've got on speed dial 2 or 3 other managers I can call up and give them a shot, get them straight out to the tenant and make sure I don't miss a beat with rent collections, because you really don't want to disrupt that tenant-landlord relationship if at all possible. So we work with local businesses that are specialists in those neighborhoods. They know the tenant base. They know the kind of people that they're dealing with. They're responsive. They've got a bit of pride still in their business. They're not big national faceless corporations or big regional businesses that have been bought out by private equity. But we've built a much wider network of property managers that we can rely on and give a shot if our existing property management fails or turns out that they're not doing well. So based on our experience, our 5 rules, I'm going to recap. Bigger properties, less units. So avoid these cheap quadplexes and triplexes. Look for 1,200 square foot plus 3 plus bedrooms, 2 plus bathrooms in nicer neighborhoods, in cheaper cities. Have minimums. Mine's $150,000 for finished value and minimum $1,200 on rent. And make sure you do a good job on the renovation. Take care of the CapEx. If you're buying a fixer-upper, make sure the deal works if you're putting on a new roof and a new sewer line and furnace. If the deal doesn't work and you're thinking, oh, I'll just replace that later, you're going to come unstuck. That's been our experience, and I see that a lot with the conversations that I'm having with other investors that made the same mistakes that we did. And then build your network. Have a network of property managers, contractors, handymen. Introduce yourself, have conversations with people. So if your property management fails, you can step in and provide whatever's needed for that tenant and that property at any given moment in time. Look, I hope this is helpful. If you've had similar experiences, I'd love to hear from you. You can write a comment and we'll have a conversation. If you found this useful, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, because we're going to be sharing more about our own real estate investment journey as foreigners who've built real estate portfolios in the US.